Powered by Red Media in partnership with TSN, it is season 6 of the Rain Dregs Hockey Podcast, presented by our title sponsor, Tim Hortons. Hey, a new menu item has arrived to start your new year right. We're well into 2025, so you need to get into spinach and feta savory egg pastries. Baked fresh every single day, served warm, stuffed with eggs, spinach, and feta, as you'd expect, all in a buttery, flaky crust. Part of the Tim Selects Everyday Value menu, including the Everything Bagel with cream cheese, if you choose, 4 cheese omelet bites, and red pepper and Swiss savory pinwheels, all starting at just $2.99. I'm looking at the banner here, Ray. I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the pastries. I'm looking at the pinwheel. I'm looking at the Everything Bagel. We're recording this episode Thursday, what is it, January 9th, 11:22 Eastern in the morning. I haven't had my breakfast yet. It's part of the new kind of fasting routine.
So what time do you start? What time do you start eating?
12:30 normally.
Oh, God, I couldn't make it.
Couldn't make it?
I go 11 to 7.
Oof.
11 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's it. Well, unless there's a spare cookie around, and then
and then you have a dinner at 7 p.m.?
No, that's the last time I eat.
Okay. Yeah, that's about right.
But yeah, the problem is, honestly, for me, this intermittent fasting, fabulous, and you see all these guys that are shredded and these women that are just yoked, and you're like, yeah, but I like cookies too much. I can't do that.
Yeah.
So,
And then you do games, and you've got the catering on big events and things like that.
You know what's really good is 2 slices of pizza at 11:45.
But if it's there, it is. If it's
impossible.
There, it's almost impossible, isn't it?
For the people that can walk by that table, I've not met them.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is going to be a challenge for me. Going to Winnipeg next week for the Jets game next Thursday, which really is just a stepping stone. With all due respect to the broadcast, I'm going to participate. But it gets me to Winnipeg so then I can drive the following morning to the Cabbage, right? It's like a 4-hour drive. So we're well into dry January, and I have not had a beverage of any description here, right? So you get out with some of those local yokels.
Okay, but here's something. Yeah, but here's something my oldest son, Matt, brought up. He said, okay, so you're going to have dry January. One of your best friends comes into town, wants to have a glass of wine. You're not going to have a glass of wine with him? I'm like, no, I'm going to have a glass of wine with him.
Sure.
It's going to be then I'm going to call it dry-ish January. So like the other night, like last night in Vancouver, the PW had their game here in Vancouver, the Takeover Tour. 19,000 fans.
Ooh,
it was terrific. Well, the night before, Jana Hefford came over for dinner because her and Cammie know each other. And I was like, well, of course they're going to have a glass of wine. I haven't seen her in a while. And so we had a really nice time. But so dry January, geez, it sounds great in theory. Have a couple beers with your buddies. You'll enjoy it more than sitting there drinking a club soda while they're...
Yeah. I think what it is for me is it's a routine buster, right? So, and that's all it is. It's just proof that, okay, you can get through it Friday afternoon with your buddies having a lunch without drinking. Or, even though Sunday afternoon at football, watching football can be a bit of a challenge. There's nothing wrong with having that beverage. There's nothing wrong. You just can't do it 4-5 times a week. That's what is being justified here.
Oh, that's what you're.
Well, I'm not saying I was doing that. I'm saying that.
Well, you kind of
that's
are.
what I'm.
You kind of are. You kind of are. I want to, before we jump into the headlines, I just send the thoughts to everybody down in Los Angeles. My, played there for 4 years, have lots of friends and family connections that are down there, and the pictures are devastated. I checked in with a couple of people yesterday, and they said, fortunately they're fine right now, but the winds are so big. What they worry about is it just blows that ash miles away, and it starts up these fires in different places. It's horrible to watch, and I just want to send my thoughts to those people.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, of course. And look, I mean, the pictures, the video are unbelievable. Like
Yeah.
almost unbelievable. Now you're seeing the worst of the worst. That's what the video is showing, but there's still multiple fires that are active right now, right? And there's been lost lives in this process. So you
Yeah.
bet. And then, the league did the right thing on Wednesday night. So
Yeah.
they postponed that Calgary LA game because clearly there's a lot more to worry about, concern yourself with, and think about than the logistics of what it takes to put on a hockey game. So, yeah. All right, let's get into the Tim Hortons headlines, Ray. And a quick look back at Wednesday night. Not often do we start headlines, at least this season, talking about the Chicago Blackhawks. But, I do want to acknowledge that it was a nice game for them, right? Connor Bedard
Yep.
with a goal and an assist. He had a disallowed goal, determined that it was kicked in. Peter Mrazek, sensational in that streak-busting win over Nate McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen and the Avalanche. No matter how you dissect this year for the Chicago Blackhawks, is there anything to take away in those small wins, those little pockets of moral victories when a big club with swagger comes around like the Avalanche? And Bedard is a big night. The goalie stands at his head. The planets align, and the Blackhawks win a game where otherwise they probably wouldn't have won.
Well, it only does. Well, certainly they'll go to the rink today. Their chests will be up a little bit, right? Their chins are up.
Yeah.
They're not kicking rocks like they've been doing for the last, few weeks. If you can string together a couple of wins, you start to feel better about yourself. All this thing about building a culture and building habits, it's really hard to do when you keep getting your ass kicked.
Yeah.
And so, guys they retreat into self-preservation. And I know I was that young guy once, right? Like we were in Hartford, we were all young guys. We were just getting our lunch handed to us.
Yeah.
And the only thing you're thinking of is it's only a 4-hour drive to the American League City. I don't want to go there anymore. Right? So if you can put a couple of these moments you're talking about, yeah, it is important. And like Frank Nazar scored last night, and he's part of their future too, right? And a big part of it, they really hope that could be part of their center ice core going forward, a first round pick. And so, one win doesn't do it, but a few do. And not only does it make I think this is important. Not only does it make the young guys feel like they can play in the league, but it gets the older guys to relax a little bit. Because when you're 34 years old and each night you go to the rink and you lose, there is a point. I mean, best job in the world, but there is a point, and you go, "What the frick are we doing here? Like, what is going on?" Yeah. We would play a great game. Like later in my career, we'd lose 5-3, and we'd get on the bus and be like, "We can't play any better than that." But you lost again. Like it's exhausting. So good for Chicago, because it's not just a win; it's a win against Colorado, and that does matter to them.
The heat is rising in Boston, right? So the Bruins have lost 5 straight. They're in tough tonight, taking on Tampa Bay Lightning in Florida. The fans chanting on Tuesday night in that loss to the Oilers, I guess it was 4-0, fire Sweeney. That was the chant in the third period. Now, Boston is third in the Atlantic Division. Third. Right. I mean, they're nowhere near the bottom of the division, and we'll talk about how clogged it is, primarily in the East, coming up later in headlines here. But another loss, 6 straight, and there's a flip-flop, and now Boston isn't in third in the Atlantic.
Yeah, you're saying if they lose to Tampa tonight.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously Don Sweeney is doing whatever he can. He's trying to probably shake things up, change things, looking for trade like every general manager does, good, bad, or otherwise. But, do you just stay the course? Do you just stay the course until something lands at your feet that makes sense? A hockey deal, a trade that hopefully makes you better if you're the Bruins.
Okay, a couple things on this. A couple of years ago, they get 132 points. I think they have a really good trade deadline. Sweeney makes a couple of really good moves, and they lose in the first round.
Yeah.
So whatever happened prior to losing in the first round doesn't matter. Now you've got the retirements of Bergeron and Krejci, and eventually that's going to sting. But it didn't sting the first year. It stung the second year because they made it through that first year. They had great goaltending and they defended really well. The problem becomes, and there's enough people that cover the league now that they realize that Boston doesn't have any prospects. Very few of them. Yeah. I think their top one right now that might be closest to playing is Matt Patra. And, he's been down there and had a really good run. And he played last year till he got hurt, but they probably got to call him up. But it's hard to call up a young guy and say, yeah, we need you to fix our offense, which we never score. They don't score. The thing about the other night, that score was 4-0, and they were miles from Edmonton. Yeah. Miles. Yeah. Like it wasn't even close. And so the problem becomes, how do you fix it? Yeah, of course you're trying to make a trade. You made your offseason signings, and they're a team that doesn't score a lot. They signed Elias Lindholm as a free agent from Vancouver. Yeah. He's a 50 to 60 point guy. And so I often think of this and talk about it when you're talking about somebody that's a 20 goal guy, and now we're talking about a 50 point guy. You have to think about the number of games they don't produce any offense. For a 20 goal guy, that's upwards of 65 games because they're probably going to get a 2-goal game somewhere. A 50 point guy, that's 30 games. He doesn't get any points. Well, who's getting them? He's supposed to be centering their top line. Brad Marchand had an 11-game point streak. I think he's -8 in his last 3 games, right? Like, he's 36. He needs help. Pasta's had a very substandard start by his standards. And then who's going to score? They don't score. They have to win with such a tight style. It's really hard to replicate that. So it feels like when we talked about last year and now this year, those, the Detroits and Ottawas, and we said Buffalo too, that were about ready to challenge. Well, if they challenge for playoff spots, that means some of the older teams are going to fall back. And it kind of feels like Boston's on the precipice of that.
And look, I appreciate the passion of the Bruins fan base. I really do. Firing the general manager at this point of the regular season does nothing. It's not like a new GM is coming in unless Cam Neely takes over, given the fact that he's hands-on anyway and quickly tries to get something going. Beyond that, you got to wait. You got to be patient. And I would also say measure the body of the work of Sweeney. And his history as general manager in Boston, as you've illustrated with some of the moves, is great. It's good, and then it's not so good. But that's pretty much the storyline of every general manager,
Well, the one thing that will be on his tombstone in Boston, whenever that is that, remember his first draft, right? Like, you'll never get away from that. But here's, his plan was good. The execution just didn't work out. They acquired 3 first-round picks. They were trying to move up in the draft. It didn't work. And 3 times in a row, he had to walk up to the podium. That was just not the plan. And then they swung and missed with those picks, right? Generally speaking. So, but that's every guy has his first time at the helm, and not everyone goes well. But they got to a point in Boston, they were close, and futures do not help you at that point.
Right. Yeah.
And so eventually it comes back to bite you in the ass. I mean, Detroit made the playoffs 25 straight years. They haven't made it since. Like, there's no way to escape it. Right? Like, eventually the cap comes for you. So for the Bruins and what they do now, the only way you hire a new GM is if you've already got somebody in mind. That's really unlikely. If they decide, oh my gosh, we're going to fire Don Sweeney now, which I'm with you. It just doesn't, the timing's just not right. And I don't think it's the right thing. Cam Neely's the only one that could take over, because you're not dropping somebody brand new in there now and say, okay, we're already driving down the road, jump on the bus.
Hmm.
And oh, by the way, we got 2 months to the deadline. And let's
Yeah.
formulate this plan. And it would be really, really, it's more complicated, I think, than people realize. But Boston's they're in a tough spot right now.
6-game road trip ends at Madison Square Garden tonight for the New Jersey Devils. Tonight being Thursday, Devils have lost 4 of 5. It feels like they're a bit fortunate to be in second in the Metro, just given the fact that the Carolina Hurricanes, I don't know, is it fair to call them suspect average in their last 10? I think they're 4-5 and 1. What are you seeing out of the Devils of late? Just one of those blips at this point of
Yeah.
the season?
Okay. So those are two really good teams you mentioned, and they've both been really average. And it just happens to be at the same time. Like it, I laugh when I hear, we want to play a 60-minute game and we want to be consistent. It makes me laugh because the other teams in the league are trying really hard too. So
yeah.
The next team that plays a 60-minute game, well, actually, Edmonton played a 60-minute game the other night. And they just steamrolled Boston. Like they steamrolled them. That happens like never. There's always 10 or 15 minutes in a game where you get a pushback. And if you handle it, then you can control the game. Same thing with like the Devils. I'm sure Sheldon Keefe would like them to play 82 straight games. Do you think Rod Brind'Amour's relaxing at home? I mean, I don't even know what Rod does. I think a relaxation for Rod is to go do 15 sets of bench. And like, like he's so, but those times in the year are going to happen. The critical part for them is that you don't let it run away and become what's happened with the Rangers, right? It's run away from them, and now trying to stop the boulder is really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
For the Devils, there was that run there. Jack Hughes said, he goes, you know what? Me and Bratt are about ready to pop off. And for about 3 weeks, they were getting 2 points a game. It was unbelievable. They just shredded everybody. As soon as their pace settles to a more normal, extended pace, the Devils lack a little depth, scoring wise, and I think that's the point of focus for them right now. Is just to score a little bit more outside of that top group, because man, those top guys are bloody dangerous, but you just need a little more if you want to be one of those top echelon teams.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll chew on that in just a moment. We'll look at the East and the West and the parity that is just so obvious right now at the midpoint of the regular season. But I wanted to bring to your attention a great read. I'm sure you've seen it on NHL.com, authored by Mike Zeisberger. And, I got a lot of time for good quality journalists, experienced guys like Zeiss, who will go into a game. In this case, it's Toronto and the Carolina Hurricanes, and go, all right, well, that beat reporter is going to just talk about game day stuff. And this guy's going to do this. Like there's 20 people in that scrum. I want to do something different. Well, what's different? Well, we've got two interesting head coaches in Craig Berube and Rod Brind'Amour. So is there a comparison to be made? And philosophically, that was the angle. That was the take by Zeiss in this. Zeiss asked the question, Ray, what's the common thread? Okay, well, you look at the games played. Yeah, Brind'Amour played a ton. Berube played a ton. Completely different games, obviously. Yes. Penalty minutes, sure. Berube well over 3,000 and all of that. But he talked to both coaches. So the question was common thread. Brind'Amour said, quote, work ethic. Berube never took a shift off, and that's carried over into his coaching, end quote. And then Berube said of Rod Brind'Amour, in the gym or on the ice, he never stopped working. You can see that hasn't changed as a coach. The players see that, and he sets the tone. Look, we have a healthy respect for all coaches across the NHL. It is an unbelievably difficult job to generate success for an extended period of time. That's why these guys get fired so often on an annual basis. But pretty obvious perspective, but a shared characteristic
No,
that can't be overlooked, can it? When you look at the style of Brind'Amour and Berube.
I no, it can't be overlooked. But I'll add to that a little bit. Is both guys have a there's nothing. Oh, what's the way to put this? There's nothing fancy or finesseful about either of them. They are direct and straightforward. Now, Rod talks a lot more than Chief does, but when you talk to them, you never walk away wondering what the thought was. Like it's
Right.
very direct. And it doesn't matter whether it's that to me and the media. Like who cares? It's that way to their players. If
Yeah.
you ask anybody with the Leafs or anybody in Carolina what their role is, they'd be able to tell you, and what's expected from them, they'd be able to
Yeah.
tell you. And then you'd go ask the coach and they'd tell you the same thing. Like both guys take away a lot of the BS. And you'd
Yeah.
think that would be very, very common. It's not. And one of the reasons is when things go a little bit off kilter, they're very consistent people.
Mm-hmm.
And so their emotion doesn't tip what they're asking players to do. And so I think like the work, but the consistency of the message, the clear idea about what they're trying to accomplish, I think that helps their players 1,000,000%. I really do. And I think it should be easier and better, but I don't coach. And so I do know this: if you're coaching, there are 42 different fires you're trying to put out every day. And these guys seem to have a consistency to get it done.
Right. So
Okay,
as a player, it's a couple of things though too, right? Right. Communication is one thing. I mean, I'm sure you as a player, no different than today's guy. I don't always need to be told I'm doing great. That's fine. I don't need my ears licked. When I'm not doing something that you think I need to be doing, okay, tell me about that. But I would add, when we talk about Brind'Amour and Berube, it's also about the presence. It's not just the communication, the presence that those guys command.
well, and just think of how different they are.
Yeah.
Like Rod's like he's drank 47 cups of coffee. Right? Like everything he does is like and his team plays
So high energy. Yeah.
and that's how his team plays. Like they're just relentless. And then I love looking over at the Toronto bench. It's the same thing in Vancouver. I look over at the Vancouver bench. Do Rick Tocchet and Craig Berube have a tie that stays knotted? Like
Never.
they don't get past the 6-minute mark of the first period, and they're like, I need to get rid of this tie somehow. And so their style is different, but it is so consistent. The consistency of the message and the directness of it. I keep going back to that. Best coach I ever played for was Al Arbour. And and I played late in my career for Joel Quenneville. I would say those were the two very best. No doubt what was expected. No doubt. When you're playing well, you might get a tap on the shin pads.
That's all you need.
But when you're playing poorly, you get a message. You don't get, hey, play better. Like, I know I got to play better. I suck. Every time I'm on the ice, the puck's in my net. I get it.
Right.
The message you get from the coach in that time, I think, is critical. And I've never been in the room on the end of that message from either of those two guys, but they both strike me as you would never wonder, and that you would want to play for those guys. That they hold you firmly accountable, but they give you enough air in your tires to know that you can handle the rough spot too. I think it's critical.
Well, excellent.
By the way, Chief scared the hell out of me.
As a player, of course, yeah.
Oh, because I knew, like, honestly, I knew he would never, what was he going to fight me for? He'd just throw me over the glass like yesterday's dinner, right? Like,
right.
But in Philly, those guys, and we were a generation removed from the lunacy of the Broad Street Bullies, but they'd skate along the red line. And if my puck went over the red line, I just find another puck. I wasn't reaching over to get it. Like when I see today, I'm like, oh my God, guys kind of go wherever they need to go. If they lose their puck, they just go get it. Nobody even looks at them. Chief would knock your stick out of your hand, and pretty soon it's down in the Flyers' end. Now, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to go get your stick? No, you just go get another one. I'm not going down there. And his hair always made him look like he was about like going to go crazy at some point.
We've got a few minutes left here in the Tim Hortons headlines, but that reminds me of something. And, I'm sure you saw the Philadelphia-Toronto fight between Connor Dewar and Joel Farabee, right? And it was funny because I'm watching the game, and obviously everybody was expecting, maybe not. I mean, Ryan Reeves and Garnet Hathaway, who have a history of getting after each other, but they've never fought in their many exchanges over time in the NHL. But because Hathaway was involved in the injury to Jake McCabe on the weekend, I think a lot of people thought, okay, Revo and Hathaway are going to square off. So Chris Cuthbert's calling the play. All of a sudden you hear Simmer say, oh, here we go. And I'm watching. I'm like, oh, geez, maybe this is the Reeves-Hathaway thing. And then it's Dewar and Farabee. And in fairness, wasn't a bad fight. I mean, Connor Dewar threw some pops, and they get to the penalty box, and you can see Joel Farabee literally say to Connor Dewar, thank you. That was a good fight. And then he talked about it post-game, how appreciative he was of Dewar taking the fight. Well, that sounds to me like a player, Farabee, who's trying to deliver a message to his coach, not just his team, that I'm accountable, but hey, Torts, like I'm trying.
Did you see that?
I'm trying to get something going.
Did you see that? And the one thing about those, they're not even middleweights; they're less than middleweights, whatever the next weight class is. Generally, nobody really gets hurt, right? Because they don't throw punches like the big boys. Do you remember when we had Wendell? Do you remember when we had Wendell Clark on, and he said when he fought, he used to punch through the back of the other guy's head? I'm like, what the f- is he talking about? There are a few things over the years of this podcast that have stuck to me like glue.
That was so visual too, right? Like it's
like, oh yeah, you punch right through the back of his head, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't know.
Well, that didn't happen in the Dewar-Farabee fight, but no, I mean, willing.
It was a good fight, though. Yep.
It was. All right, just enough time. I want your thoughts on the parity that exists. We talk about this every single year. It's not new to the NHL, but there is that serious logjam, particularly in the East. You've got Buffalo, who's last place, 16th in the Eastern Conference, only 7 points out of a wild card spot, and then you've got the New York Rangers, who is a staple basically on every NHL podcast. They're just 4 points back. So, start in the East. And when is it relevant to start really studying and watching the standings based on what we're seeing now? Maybe 15, 20 games left?
Well, it depends on the vision and the perception of the team that's sitting where you are. So you mentioned the Rangers and Buffalo. Now, I don't think the goal for the Rangers would be to make the playoffs, lose in the first round.
No.
Right? So they view that gap perhaps a little differently than Buffalo might. That's just 3 points behind them. Because Buffalo would love to get into a playoff series, man. Wouldn't that city love to see a playoff game? They don't even remember it. There's kids that are 10 years old, never seen a playoff game. And so
wild.
I think when you say, like, when do teams make moves, it really depends on what they view their team as.
Mm-hmm.
If they're like, man, this has been a lousy year and we're a few points out, like, we're not going to do anything when we get in there. We've got too many holes, whatever the case may be. I think those teams will be quicker to dismantle or to make moves to look to the future. If you're a team that's a few points out, like, I think Detroit under Todd McClellan, they've had a really good little run here. They've put themselves back in that gaggle of teams.
Mm-hmm.
they're looking to make it.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
not, and it doesn't necessarily mean the other teams aren't, but they're not going to
No.
blow their brains out on a trade and trade futures when they think, you know what, this is maybe the time to retool.
Right. Okay, shift to the West, right? Dallas is on the old Jack Hughes heater, right? They've won 5 in a row in that fight in the Central for third with the Colorado Avalanche. You know,
Yeah.
it's a 1-2 race right now between Winnipeg and Minnesota. And then you shift to the Pacific, and you've got Vegas with a 6-point lead over the Oilers, LA just 2 back of Edmonton, and Vancouver and Calgary chasing the Kings. So a little bit more definition in the West than there is in the East, but still plenty of time and plenty of room for some juggling and jostling there.
Yeah, so I'll use Boston and Toronto as an example here of how quick it can change. Uh, Toronto's won 5 straight. The Bruins have lost 5 straight. What was a
Yeah.
close-ish standing
Yeah.
is now miles. It seems like it's miles apart. And so those teams that are all kind of bunched in there or maybe spreading a little bit in the West, a 2-week stretch where you win 5 in a row, which is going to happen, man, that changes the whole outlook on everything. Dallas is interesting to me because they've got a lot of cap room. They've got some prospects. It's a team that I think Jim Nill will make a significant move now. It really hurt them losing Chris Tanev. They loved their defense with Tanev there. So they signed Dumba, and they're trying to do a few things. Dallas will be a player before this is out, and they'll be a good team. It's crazy how much they miss Joe Pavelski.
Oh boy,
They miss him.
Oh,
Face-offs, stability, like they miss them everywhere.
yeah.
And so, but Dallas is good. I wouldn't look past them.
You big believer in winning the division, just and everything that goes along with that, and automatically, I think of Toronto and how potentially that's hurt them in the past. Always have good teams, but they don't close on the division, and you take away some of the incentives that go along with winning the division. Or does it matter?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they played Boston 14 years or Tampa in a row. It seems like, right? Like they can't get away from these
really
guys.
does.
So it would be nice to win the division and play somebody else. Like somebody with less history. I think that would really help Toronto. Like I really do. But I don't think you should sell out to win the division because we're sitting here. This all starts this conversation with parity, and like if teams are 5 points apart, what the hell's the difference? It's not even a win a month.
No,
right? Like it's so. But I think to play somebody different would be beneficial to Toronto just in their mindset. They've got a good thing going right now. They really do. I like how the Leafs are winning the games they're winning. It's not necessarily always pretty. They grind it out a lot more than they've had to in the past, and I think that'll serve them well when they get later in the year.
Always good stuff. Thank you. Headlines brought to us by Tim Hortons.
Everyday value with every bite. Say hello to Tim Selects. Starting at only $2.99, try one or try our full lineup of warm, delicious options. Tim Selects, everyday value that's here to stay. Order them on the Tim's app today. It's time for Tim's.
We're going to return to our usual programming next week here on the podcast, Ray. We'll have a guest, Ask Ray and Dregs Anything. Ryan Rashog will come away from his work vacation. He will be back into the show, but, I think we managed okay this week. Without the boss, I think we did okay.
I think it really goes to show you how much that the boss has to do with things. I mean, things went along fine, and he's on his, I don't know what he's doing or where he is. Is he on a world tour or a backyard tour? I don't even know, but he's certainly not here.
He asked me not to disclose his location. I don't know. It's a bit weird. Yeah.
Why does he think that he's going to have people like clamoring to chat with him?
Yeah. He has an alias. Did you know when he checks into hotels, he's that big of a deal?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you know what I did learn yesterday? Well, 2 days ago on Overdrive, I was listening in Toronto and I saw the clip where O'Dog revealed that James's name is Forbes, James Duthie.
I didn't see that.
Oh my gosh, you got to look it up. So I texted him yesterday and I said, "Hey Forbes," and he didn't answer. So I decided that every day I'm going to text, "Hey Forbes," until he answers.
He responds.
He gave me a response. Do you know what his name is?
Mm.
James Forbes Duthie the Sixth. I can't even say it without laughing. So now there's no chance I call him James ever again. He's Forbes.
Forby.
Hey Forbes.
Forbester. How's it going?
If you don't call him Forbes on the air for your next game, I will be really disappointed.
Well, that's tonight, so there could be a Forbes slipped in there, but that's outstanding.
But the Sixth, really creative family, the Duthies.
Wow, did not know that. All right, buddy, what's your weekend looking like?
I'm going to Florida tomorrow. So I've got, what am I doing? Oh, I got a direct flight actually, which is really quite exciting.
Super, yeah.
So Vancouver to Miami, and ride up to Sunrise, and the Bruins and the Panthers on ABC Saturday afternoon. Yeah. The Panthers won in Utah last night, and so they're headed back home. And the Bruins are in Tampa, as you mentioned, today. So they're going to be an owly bunch. These are big games for them.
Huge.
And then I fly home
All right,
Sunday.
well, good. Travel safe. Not a whole lot going on here. Get through tonight. Leafs and Hurricanes, and drift into the weekend. And then, as I said, heading to Winnipeg next week. So little bit of travel, just dabbling. Now, nothing too serious.
Are we going to be able to put a schedule together? When are we exactly doing the show next week? Because this week
that'll be up to you.
It was a debacle.
This was a debacle. It'll be up to you. I'm good Tuesday, Thursday, but I'm also open
Tuesday's
on Monday.
good. Yeah, Tuesday's good.
All right, buddy. Safe travels.
So we'll talk to you then. Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you.
And thank you to our sponsors who continue to support Ray and Dregs, and as always, make this podcast possible. Our title sponsor, Tim Hortons, and thank you to our pals, Ask Ray and Dregs Anything, Acon. Till next time, stay safe, everybody.